Welcome grade 10s to yet another wonderful, exciting life science lesson. Welcome on this wonderful day again. I keep saying wonderful because it's exams now. I'm sure you guys are writing exams. You probably only watch this program later, but I'm feeling relaxed because it's exam time now for me and I can get a lot of my work done while you are all stressing. Guys, we've now starting a new section of work that you can see on the board. It's blood and blood vessels. And if we follow the theme that we followed throughout the year, you noticed we started off with all these very small things and we're starting to build and build and build. And the last section that we did, we started looking at the human, all right, human systems. We started with the cell, then we looked at the tissues, right, and tissues make up organs and organs make up system. And we're starting now with the transport system of humans, and that is the heart and all the blood and the blood vessels, and we're going to break it down into the smaller lessons for you because it's quite a chunk of work and it's going to be much more manageable if we do it in the smaller section. So let me stop talking and let us start. Guys, what we're going to concentrate on today is we're going to look at blood and blood vessels. We're going to focus on the heart and everything later, but we're going to start off with looking at some of the stuff that you've already done. So if I have a look at this, at our lessons overview today, right, one of the things that we're going to start off, we're just going to do very quickly, we're going to look at the different circulatory systems that an organism can have. Oh, and I've chosen funny color there. The circulatory systems, you're going to see what I mean. I'm going to talk about an open and closed circulatory system. This section should be familiar with you. The structure and function of blood, the reason being, right, we focused some of it, right, when we did our mammalian tissue. So now you can see how mammalian tissue has started to come into play here. And then we're going to have a look at our different types of blood vessels. And I'm sure they are words that you are familiar with. That's going to be the artery, the veins, and the capillaries. Okay, so let's start. When we talk about all these different circulatory systems, what do we mean? All right, we're talking about a transport system. We're talking about a transport system. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 1 minute, just starting off 1 minute. And what I want you to tell me, all right, I just want you to start to think, because the reason why I'm going to ask these two questions is you need to be able to know what is the function of what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a transport system. Okay, so I'm going to give you 1 minute. And all I want you to answer is two things. Why do we need a transport system? All right. How do unicellular organisms, unicellular, one cell, all right? And the next one is, what are the two types of circulatory systems that multicellular animals can have, right? Use your textbooks, use all the resources in front of you. I'm going to give you 1 minute. Your time starts now. Okay, guys, so when we looked at these questions, what I'm actually trying to focus you on is, what does a transport system need to do? So our first question is, why do we need a transport system? Okay, now I know when you think of transport, the word that needs to come to mind is to move. Okay, so when we're looking at moving, we're looking at this, we have a system where we need to move things. Now you need to think of the next question. What am I moving? I am going to be moving, right, Now I need to think. I'm going to be moving nutrients, okay, which is in the blood. Nutrients, when I use the word nutrients, I'm basically saying all the things that my body might need, okay? And what else do I need to do? And waste products. Because although I make some good things, I'm also going to make waste products. And what do I need to do? I need to move all the nutrients to all the cells. And when I make a waste product, I need to move it out of the body. So when we look at this whole concept of what a transport system is, I need to move things around. And when I say things, we can't say things in biology. What is it specifically? I need to move nutrients. I need to move gases. I need to move, when I talk about nutrients, I'm talking about glucose. I'm talking about hormones. I'm talking about proteins. Okay? And when my body does certain process, it produces waste. And this waste has to move out of the body. So we need to be able to transport it out of the body. Now, how do unicellular organisms transport? Now, imagine it's one cell. It needs to get things in and it needs to get things out. And how does it do that? Okay, it does that by the process of diffusion. Okay, well done. Diffusion, movement from a high concentration to a low concentration. So it's nice and simple, it's quick, it's these little unicellular cells, so it's easy, it doesn't need to have a specific system. Now, when you are multicellular, you have many cells. And because you have many cells, you now need to have, right, a particular system that's going to bring things in and out, which brings us to this key concept. Okay, guys, if in front of me over here, our two key concepts that we are going to look at is an open circulatory system and a closed circulatory system. Now, what do I mean by that? If you have a look, right, this is like a little insect or something. When we look at a circulatory system, we are transporting this, we need to move things around, okay? So we need to move things. We know that's what a transport system is. And how we move things around is we use, and we're going to look at that later, can you see? Both of them have got this little pumping structure called a heart that's going to move things around. Now, in smaller little invertebrates, do you see here? Invertebrates, vertebrates, so they're going to need something, right, a lot bigger, right, a lot bigger. What we find is, have a look here. Here, when I look at the red, right, we're going to look at the concept blood. Blood must stay in a blood vessel. Okay, so we have this concept called blood, and it cannot move out of the blood vessel. It must stay, and that's why I've highlighted that, inside a blood vessel. However, in an open circulatory, and guys, if you've ever squashed an insect and all yellow goes out, that's pretty much what happens. So we don't have this thing called blood, we have this fluid, that's fluid, and it kind of, this whole yellow here, it floats around the body, so it's full of fluid. There is no blood system as such, and what we've got is, right, we've got these smaller organisms, and their whole body cavity, right, is filled with this fluid. Usually when we talk about invertebrates, if we look at insects, they need to fly and those things, and it's much easier for them to get the oxygen that from inside this body tissue, this hemicole, that they can use. Whereas when we look at invertebrates, as soon as we confine it, right, to a vessel, we've got pressure. And when we've got pressure, that pressure can move it over much greater distances. Okay, so the first term that you needed to know today is the difference between an open circulatory and a closed circulatory system. Right, now I'm going to give you time again. I'm going to give you 1 minute, and we're going to look at blood. Now, we looked at blood already this year, and we looked at it, it was one of our connective tissues. And I want you to answer two questions, 1 minute. One, why is blood such a unique connective tissue? And number two, what are the 4 components that make up blood? What do we find blood? Okay, what do we find in this thing that we call blood? Okay, 1 minute, quick, 1 minute. Your time starts now. Can you remember what we did when we did mammalian tissue, when we looked at blood? I hope you can remember, because you can't keep on forgetting stuff that you did at the beginning of the year. You're going to be asked on all of it, and remember everything, right, joins in together, little bits that keep on intertwining that we're going to keep bringing up. Okay, the first question. Why is blood such a unique? And unique means, why is it so special? What makes it different from any other of the connective tissues? And there's 2 things I hope that you were able to point out. Number 1, the first thing, it is the only connective tissue that is a liquid. If you remember all the other connective tissues that we did, they were all either hard, right, or jelly-like. And because it's liquid, what else did it not have? Okay, it did not have fibers. Okay, no fibers in blood. So 2 points. It's the only liquid connective tissue, and it didn't have fibers. Because what we're going to find in the blood are these 4 components or 4 elements. When we spoke about the 4 components that make up blood, what are they? Right? They are blood plasma, and then in the blood plasma, what did we find? We found cells. Remember, so blood plasma basically was my matrix, and then we had the cells, and we had 3 different kinds of cells. There are a few names for them. You must remember both their common name and, all right, their biological name. We found red blood cells. We found white blood cells. And we found blood platelets. Okay, right, so guys, I hope you were able, right, to remember that. So now we're just going to go through it quite quickly, right, because it's work that we have done already, so you cannot forget stuff that you did at the beginning of the year, right? Mammalian tissue, there's a reason why we did the tissue. Tissue, right, makes organs, and we are busy with, right, the blood, and the blood is part of our transport system, part of, right, this liquid medium that's going to travel or transport through our blood vessels. Okay, so when we have a look at plasma, right, when we have a look at plasma, I'm going to put this diagram over here, right? Plasma, if you have this look over there, right, is 55% of our total blood. We're going to have a look at all our different cells, right, later. And if you have a look at any kind of question on or diagram on plasma, you're going to see that it's yellowish. And the reason why it's yellow is that it's the red blood cells. All right, these red ones, we're going to speak about them just now, that are going to give it its shape. So when we look at, all right, there we go, the watery matrix known as blood. Let me go into this next one, much easier. Okay, when we look at blood plasma, it's the liquid portion, and that's what we said, all right, that blood plasma is. Now, liquid means transport. right? What is it? It's easier. If something is in a liquid form, it's much easier to move things around, okay? Which means that, what have we got? Most of blood plasma is water, okay? Because water is a liquid, and because of that, then we can transport things around. Remember what we're looking at. We want to move things. It's much easier to move a liquid than it is to move a solid. So what are we going to find in that blood plasma? Have a look at the rest of the things. What's inside must be things that pretty much can dissolve. There are a few elements that don't dissolve in blood plasma, like large proteins, but what have we got? We've got glucose, we've got gases. We can put gases in here. All right, we've got hormones, we've got blood clotting factors. Our blood needs to clot. All right, what else have we got? We've got wastes, because remember, what are we transporting? So after we've eaten a meal, some of our nutrients are in there. We've got waste that we need to transport to the kidney or to breathe out, etc. And it's much easier to transport if it's in a liquid form. Okay, we're going to have a quick break. Make sure that you got everything ready, because when we come back, we're going to have a look at the cells. Right, have a quick stretch, a quick little run around, get all the blood flowing. We're going to be right back. Welcome back after your stretch or your drink of water or your quick little wee break. Right, guys, we're going to go on right with the cells. We've got quite a bit of work that we need to cover and some questions. So, and the work that we've done now is stuff that you did right when you were looking at the mammalian tissue of blood. Now, when we look at the different cells, if I'm going to go back one, right, what did we notice? Go back one more, okay? That blood was made up of this liquid called plasma, right? It's called our liquid. And floating in, right, we're going to find cells, right? We're going to find cells. Now, when we look at the cells, we have done them before when we did tissue. You need to be able to identify it. Now, when we look at these cells, the words that we use, do you notice there's a variety? Red blood cells, red blood corpuscles, or erythrocytes. All of those are the same, mean the same thing. You can use any of those terms, right, and it would mean a red blood cell. Obviously, the easiest one for you to remember. Now, what is so special about a red blood cell? A red blood cell, and that's the whole thing, is red. Well, actually, it's orange, and the reason why it is a different color is because here we have this iron pigment. Let's go back to biochemistry, right? Let's go back to biochemistry. We have this iron pigment, hemoglobin, that fills our red blood cell. Now, when we look at the shape of our red blood cell, you can remember it has a specific name. It's a biconcave disc. Also, biconcave means, look here, it's like a chair. It's got a, right, it's almost hollow in the middle, but without the hollow, like a donut. Now, with that, there's another two words that I can use here. Soft and flexible. Now we start to need to use these qualities as they are needed in my transport system. Now, why do I say soft and flexible? If I'm going to draw a blood vessel and we're going to hear about a capillary, and a capillary is very, 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 very thin, what needs to travel through? My red blood. Here we go. Now, what happens if it wasn't soft and flexible? It would get stuck over there. All right, so what do we need is, why something soft and flexible? Because I can move it. Now imagine, blood needs to flow, right? Blood needs to flow. If you're going to stop something, the blood is going to stop flowing and it's going to form a clot, and something bad could happen, as we're going to look at later when we look at things, diseases, etc., that could happen with the heart. So why do I have a cell that's soft and flexible? What is it doing? It needs to transport. it would be a bit stupid if the cell was hard and then it wouldn't be able to perform its function. Okay, so what we do is soft and flexible so it can fit right through the capillaries. And the capillaries are tiny. Now what we notice, it doesn't have a nucleus. Why does it not have a nucleus? Guys, imagine, here's the cell, here's the nucleus. What would the nucleus do? The nucleus would take up space. And why do we want that not to happen? Because this hemoglobin over here is going to pick up oxygen, right? The hemoglobin binds with oxygen. So the more hemoglobin I can put in my cell, wonderful, why? The more hemoglobin I have, the more oxygen I can pick up. So a nucleus is in a way, all right? The nucleus way. It's a bit pointless if you're getting into a taxi and all the seats have got things and tires on, or you want to get people in, don't you? Okay, so you want to make space for them. So you want to make sure that when you need to drive, when you want to get into a taxi and you want to sit there, there's lots of space for you to get in. And that is why, right, there is no nucleus, so we can put in more hemoglobin. Now, when it comes to the red blood cell, I want you to have a look, all right? Its function, there we go, I'm going to come back to its function just now. Let me go one back. Guys, in front of you, you're going to have a graph. And I'm not going to give you time. I'm going to talk. But the red blood cells, if you have a look over here, we can change the number of red blood cells that we have in our blood. Right, and how do we do that? Okay. Now imagine what happens imagine you're down in Durban, right, and you are up here, or your cousin is down in Durban and you are up here in Joburg, Pretoria. One of you is near the sea level, and the other is high above sea. Now what happens as we go up? The higher up we go, what happens to the amount of oxygen? The amount of oxygen becomes less. So now all of a sudden you're down here by the sea and you up here at high altitudes and there's less oxygen. So what do you need? You need to be able, because you can't get as much oxygen in, you need to make use of that oxygen that you do get in. So what your body does is, the word is acclimatize. I'm going to write it over here. Acclimatize. And what do I mean by that? As I move higher, what do I notice? Right? I notice how my body compensates. So I need oxygen. So what does my body do? My body makes more red blood cells. So the more red blood cells I have, the more taxis I have, the more oxygen, right, I can then, right, breathe in. So now when I go down to sea level again, I've got more red blood cells and I've got more oxygen. And athletes use this process to train. The higher they train, what does their body do? Their body naturally produces more red blood cells. The more oxygen they can breathe in, the harder they can train. The more they can train, the fitter they become. Okay, so look out for that one. That can sometimes be a nice interpretive question. Okay, guys, then its partner in crime is a white blood cell. Now, the reason why we say white or leuco, that means colorless. Okay, it's colorless. Can you remember when we did the plant cell? We had a leucoplast. Can you remember that was where we the plaster that stored starch. Now, in front of you, you'll see there's a diagram of all the different white blood cells. You don't need to know all of those names. But when you look at them, the first thing you must notice is how are they different to the red? What's the first thing you notice? My first thing that I notice is always that it has a nucleus. Okay, that's the one. Also what happens is they come in different shapes. They come in different shapes. Okay, so when we look at it, we automatically see they are different to the red blood cells, right? They have a nucleus, they are bigger. Now, one of the words we use to describe them is amoeboid. And what amoeboid means is that it can change its shape, right? This can go like that. Now, if we see a little bit of bacteria over here, the cytoplasm can stream and it can go there and it can engulf the bacteria. Now that, when it comes to white blood cells, the white blood cells, unlike the red blood cells, what must they also do? They must also leave the blood vessels. They must leave the blood vessels because they need to fight infection. They are your immune response. They fight, they eat all the bacteria and those kind of things, right? So what they must do is they must be able to leave the blood vessels, and when they leave the blood vessels, they must be able, all right, to go out the body and do their defensive. Now, when we look at the white blood cells, just two terms that I want you to know. Some of the white blood cells are termed phagocytes. Phago means to eat, right? Phago means to eat. So when it's bacteria, remember when I showed you those feet, they go around, right, and they eat the bacteria or a virus or anything into the body, and they bring it in. And then those lysosomes are going to implode, and they're going to kill all of the things. Okay, so what we're going to do here, what do? They are going to engulf, that was phago means, they're going to engulf the bacteria and help with your immune response. Then you've got the others called your lymphocytes, and we're going to look at another transport system called our lymph system, and what they do is they're going to produce antibodies, right? And what is an antibody, right? When we have a cell that attacks us, antibodies join over the cell, right? They put around this foreign cell that this cell can't come into any of our body cells, and they can't do any harm. So as you can see, right, what is the function of our white blood cells? Our white blood cells, right, are there to help us with our immunity. When we looked at our red blood cells, two words that I hope you don't get too scared by. Oopsie. Our red blood cells transport. Okay, they are the ones, they stay in the blood, they transport. And you're going to learn about it when you're in grade 11, that when oxygen combines with the hemoglobin, it forms oxyhemoglobin. And when carbon dioxide, right, joins with hemoglobin, nice big word there, it forms carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, now our last cell. It's our tiny, tiny, tiny little fragments. As you can see there, they're little disc shaped. Okay, the little disc, and these are the one cell that most of you I won't say most of you have seen, you do see, because you call it your scab, right? You call it your scab. So when you cut yourself open, they're the ones, they're flat little discs. They're going to pile one on top of each other, and by doing so, they're going to harden and they're going to block the damaged area. Okay, they're going to block the damaged area, so what can happen that the blood doesn't come out, and they're there to protect that open sore, right, so that the healing process can start to begin. So as you have a look at a platelet here, you can see it changes shape. So it's a little disc, and when it needs to, it forms all these threads, because what these threads are going to do is they're going to help with the blood clotting. Okay, now guys, when it comes to the tissue, I've put two diagrams here. You can see, when you see a diagram, the first thing you need to do is be able to differentiate which is the white, which is the red, which are the platelets, and you might get either diagram. Either one, whether it is a schematic diagram or a blood smear, where you again, right, it's not as obvious to you, you are going to need to have a look to see which are the white blood cells, which are the red blood cells. Those are far more easier. And then have a look. There's your platelets. Tiny, small little disc shaped with a very small nucleus. We're going to have a short break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to start with looking at blood vessels, then hopefully we're going to get to some questions. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. I hope you had a nice little break there again. We always need to just get all the blood moving around. Okay, so let's start on our next concept that we need to work on. The cells were something that we had done that was almost just I won't say a revision, but you need to know your mammalian tissue. Now we're looking at this concept of a blood vessel. Now what a blood vessel is, all right, oopsie daisy, we're going backwards. All right, blood vessel is something, all right, I'm going to use the word tube because the blood needs to flow through, is a tube, all right, that is going to keep blood inside. So what we need to do is a blood vessel, all right, is our tube. It's almost like a road, and our blood needs to stay inside that. And then what we will do is, if we need to move things out or if we move things in, however it will move into the blood vessel. Now what we need to move, right, is we've looked at this whole concept of blood, and we've got round about 5 to 6 liters of it, and that is constantly circulating throughout your body. Now this next diagram is very important over here. We have different names for different types of blood vessels. Okay, we have different names because when we look at the blood vessels and we're going to look at the structure, what you're going to notice is that you can actually, there is a difference between them. Not necessarily because they have a different function, but some, all right, come from this heart where there's this huge big pumping effect, and others, right, just imagine trying to get all the blood all the way from your big toe all the way to the heart, and they don't have this nice big pumping structure about it. So we got to then kind of like play around with how they look. Now if you have a look at the diagram in front of me, right, and the words above it, there are 3 words that you need to know when it comes to the blood vessels. They are going to be what an artery is, what a vein is, and what a capillary is. Now, if you have a look at this diagram below, which when you have a look at it, you would notice it's a very important diagram when you look at the transport section. And as you will see, when we look at the flow of blood, blood never leaves these blood vessels. Why? Because we have a closed, we're looking at this whole concept of a closed circulatory system. Now, when I'm talking about an artery and a vein, I can actually put 2 diagrams over there. Okay. Now, when we look at the definition of an artery and a definition of a vein, I want you to show the arrows. Now have a look at that. There is the heart, there is the arrow. An artery is a blood vessel that takes blood away from the heart. Okay, look what A for away. So any kind of blood vessel, and most arteries are going to carry oxygen, but there are an exception. That is why this is the preferred terminology. The blood vessels moving blood away from the heart are called an artery. Okay, and this is an artery here. Now what you will notice is an artery, okay, when we look at it, imagine our road system. Our road system has the same principles. We have these big highways, right, where we fit lots and lots and lots of traffic. Now, if you can imagine the way you travel, you are going to your house. Say you're on a highway. When you get to, how you need to get to your house is you're going to travel for a long way on this big, big road. But as soon as the closer you get to your house, what happens to the roads? They start to get smaller and smaller. And this concept is exactly the same in your body. You need to get, remember, what do we need to transport? We need to transport oxygen, nutrients to each and every single little cell. And cells are microscopic. So a big artery is not going to get where it needs to do if it doesn't get smaller. Okay, so what do we need to do is, in your blood system, you need to go from big, and then they start to branch off. Can you see here? So basically, when it branches off, an artery branches into smaller blood vessels called an arteriole. Then this massive branch over here of microscopic structures. Now they must be microscopic because why? They need to go and need to deliver all the nutrients to each and every single one of the cells. A cell is microscopic, right? A capillary is just as small. So what do? We need to take the blood to a cell. Now usually in an artery we have got oxygen, we have got nutrients. And what does it do? It needs to take it to these cells. Now, what does a cell do? You're going to look at it in grade 11. A cell undergoes all these processes called cellular respiration. And what does it produce? It produces waste. Okay, it produces waste like carbon dioxide, right? Urea. So we've got waste products. Now, what is the function of my transport system? To move things to, right? To deliver. And then those wastes we must go to take things from, to transport. Take something to it, and then you need to take it away. And those are usually your waste products. Okay, so what I need to have a system that takes it in. So what do? Now all of a sudden, usually why we color it in blue is that because of the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood does tend to be darker. So a capillary, right, a capillary branches now to become bigger. Now it's going to go into this big, all right, vessel called a vein. So as you can see, right, a venule is a small vein. Now what is the terminology of a vein? A vein takes blood to the heart. Right, so veins, anytime we go to the heart, a vein will take blood to the heart, and the artery, remember A for away, will take blood away. Now, if you have a look at the structure below, what you will see, and I put two structures there, right? What you will see is that the artery and the vein, if I give you these diagrams, what do you notice about them? They look different, but I don't want you to actually look at the diagram. I want you to look at the coloring in. Now, when you get a diagram of the artery and vein, some of you, there's lots of biological terminology as well. The tunica media, right? And there's a whole lot of the inside and the outside. I don't want you to concentrate on that. I want you to concentrate on the tissues that make up an artery or vein. Now, if you have a look at the tissue layer, what do we find on the outside? Okay, on the outside, we find this connective tissue. Now, this connective tissue is usually made up of elastic connective tissue. And you ask yourself, why? Right, why do we need elastic connective tissue? Well, when blood is rushing through an artery, what does my artery need to do? It needs to stretch, okay? It needs to stretch. So what does an elastic band do? It stretches, then it returns back to its position. Stretches and returns back to its position. So we need those properties, right, in my blood vessels. I need them to stretch. What's the next thing that we also see? We've got elastic fibers, but we've got smooth muscle. Now have a look at the red. Look at the smooth muscle in a vein and look at the smooth muscle in an artery. This over here shows a better. Look at the red. That is muscle. That is muscle. That is a small amount of muscle. What does that show you about an artery? A muscle brings movement. Okay, now you need to think. Arteries go away from the heart. Now here's my heart, and there's my little big toe. No, my little big toe. My big toe right at the bottom. I need to pump blood from my heart all the way right down to my toe. So what do I need to do? I need to squeeze, right? I need to squeeze it. So when I squeeze it, I need muscles to squeeze it. So the more muscle I have, the more I can squeeze, the more I can get it down. Oh dear, now let's look at the vein. Why has my vein got such a smaller area? Okay, because what happens now, what's happening now, the blood is coming back. Okay, the blood is coming back all the way up to the top, and it hasn't got that big, it hasn't got so much muscle. So I need to find a different way, all right, how to put it up. So what I do is, very often in a vein, I'm going to have a valve. Right, I'm going to have a valve, and that's going to stop the backflow. Now the last one that we have, look at this, epithelial tissue. What kind of epithelial? Squamous. Why? Because it's flat, because it's smooth, because it's thin. Guys, what is the function of my transport system? My transport system is to transport, to move. My blood vessels, I line it with a nice, smooth epithelial tissue. Why? What do I want to do? Blood to travel through smoothly, right? I want it to travel through smoothly. So I make an epithelial tissue. And what's the function of epithelium? To line cavities. I want it to be nice and smooth. Now have a look over here. What do we notice about my capillary? My capillary is only made up of one single layer of epithelial cells. Why? Guys, let's go back to this diagram. Here's my cell, here's my capillary. What do I want? I want to move things quickly in and quickly out. So there we go, look, capillary, there we go, and cell. There's my cell. So how do I go out fast and how do I go out slow? If I make it thick, it's going to go slow. Remember, what do I need to do here? I need to exchange things. So the smaller it is, the thinner it is, the easier it is going to be for me to move substances in and out. We call it exchange, right? So that is why it's just made up of a very thin layer. How I would suggest that you study this section, I'm going to show you what I've done over here. Take a diagram of an artery and of a vein and of a capillary, okay, and draw up a table. So there's the diagrams. Draw up a table like I have done. And what you do is you compare each of the different, all right? Compare each of the different structures. I'll do the first one with you, like we did over here. So when we looked at an artery, what was one of the most obvious things we saw? Has a thick layer of muscle. Right? And then we looked at our veins, because that was the muscle. All right, and there we go. We noticed has a thin muscle. There we go. Thin muscle. Let me write that over again for you quickly. Okay. A thin muscle layer. Right, and capillary has none. And then you would do that for each of them. Then here in the middle, it's a lumen, it's a space, and you would say, right, a small lumen. The smaller it is, the greater the pressure. Large lumen.
Okay, very microscopic, very small. And so you would go on here, you would have valves present. Okay, so there we go. And then you can do it on the other side. So take a table, take the three diagrams, and compare it. Can I tell which is an artery? Can I tell which is a vein and which is a capillary? By their structure. In other words, what they look like. And then by their function. Because an artery and a vein and a capillary have different functions. What's the function of the artery? Right, is usually transport blood away from heart. Okay, here, transport blood to heart. And this one you would say exchange of substances. Okay, so you take their structure and their function. So if you have a look at the very first question that we've looked at here, what do you notice? A typical question is they give you, all right, let's have a look, diagrams A, B, and C. And they don't tell you which one is which. But they tell you that they are the three different sorts of vessels. Okay, and they tell you that they are not drawn to scale. So when you look at it, what is the first thing you need to see? The three different types of blood vessels are going to be an artery, a vein, or a capillary. Now, obviously, if we have a look at this, what are we going to look at? We're going to look at how small it is or how large it is. We're going to look at the amount of muscle layer. We're going to have a look at the size of the lumen, because that is going to tell us which of the blood vessels it is. Okay, so what is our first question? Aha! Our very first question asks us to identify blood vessels A, B, and C. Okay, so we're going to do that. All right, we're going to do that over here on the notes. Number A, look at the amount of muscle. That should tell you lots of thick muscle, that is an artery. Okay, the next one, which would then make this one, because it's got different layers, a vein, which means that the very, very small single layered one would be the capillary. That is usually the easier one for you to be able to grasp. It's these ones, the artery and the vein. Look at the muscle layer. The thicker the muscle, it's going to be an artery, or the wider the lumen or a valve is going to be. Okay, so guys, we're almost running out of time. So when you have a look at these questions, here I can actually ask you a calculation question, right? The magnification, I can ask you size, because you see I can use something to measure. Okay, guys, I'm afraid our time has come to the end. Thank you so much for tuning in. Can't wait to see you again next time. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Goodbye and cheerio.